Coming up, the tank may be on in Brooklyn, but that doesn't mean that we can't have overtime thrillers at the Clays. The Nets fall, but give us all of the feels we've been missing for years. We dive in on the game coming up here next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends. It is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We're 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And Doug, oh baby, when we talk about a team that's destined to draft somewhere high in next year's class, maybe it wouldn't be fun. Maybe we wouldn't enjoy ourselves on a nightly basis. Turns out this is the most fun that watching Brooklyn Nets basketball has been, I would argue, in years. In years, as they lose the game at home here. Overtime thriller, 144-139 to the Nuggets.
As we've always said, success is results divided by expectation. That's it. Like, that's the definition of success. We've long stood on that, on the back of that definition of like how to determine whether something is successful or not. Results matter, but expectation factors in way more than anything else. Last year at this time, they lose an overtime thriller in Denver. Everyone's freaking out. I mean, I'm saying if it happened, everyone's freaking out. Like, all the coaching decisions were wrong. Blah, blah, blah. This team can't do it. Yada, yada, yada. This year, they lose an overtime thriller at home to Denver. Nets fans over the moon. Like, it's like, the team's fun. They're trying hard. They gave it their best effort. Still get the loss. We're still in the Cooper flag sweepstakes, but it's also fun to watch. You can cheer all the way through. And if we get the W, you get the W. You've never seen a fan base more excited about a 1-3 start in the history of basketball. Go find me a 1-3 start where the fans have nothing but positive things to say about the team. It's remarkable. And this game was, I mean, just like totally proof positive of the entire like sort of gestalt around where Nets fans are right now, because it's it's just hilarious on a number of different levels. I loved every minute of it.
The first quarter was amazing. The game overall was amazing. We're talking about all of it. And I will just say, because it ties into that energy around it. We were doing the host battle all season long. We're in the fourth game. Doug takes the Nets in this one, in the 5.5 points. I say, I'm going to go with the Nuggets here, right? And I was willing, more than willing, at the end of the game, regulation, they draw the play up. If that bucket goes down and the Nets win, I say, listen, I'm going to take that loss 8 days a week. The fact that Dorian Finney-Smith lays in the meaningless bucket at the end, I did the quick, because I'm a mathematician, the quick math on that. I went, oh, well, okay, there's a little bit there. But in the end, it's still awesome because the Nets played a game, going back to the first quarter. There's no world where you or I or any Nets fan would have thought coming into this season that the Nets were capable of scoring 40 points in a quarter. There's a bigger likelihood we would have said, how many times will they score 40 in a half before we think about them scoring 40 in a quarter? That alone, you mentioned the fan excitement of it was, oh, this team can just score. This team can fire. And it came on the back of Dennis Schroder, who's having best start to a season of his career. And then you also get Cam Johnson coming alive there as well. And just the entire energy on this team in that first quarter really got everyone gassed up.
Yeah, I mean, they came out absolutely firing. Denver obviously coming on the back-to-back, just having to travel from Toronto. That was a big part of why we said the Nets, I thought, had a chance in this game, was that just the rest factor. And Denver really hasn't looked that good. I mean, the bench is terrible. We kind of saw a little bit of that here tonight. But
they could use some veterans like the Nets have. Just, something.
I'll take the L here, because I preached from the mountaintops all offseason about how bad this offense was going to be. And I really thought, because they had just the lack of wing ball creators in the modern NBA, that's a really hard sort of nut to crack, unless you need to have someone on the 3 through 5 that can create their own shots, or just be, incredible sort of hub of the attack ball guy, sort of like Jokic. Otherwise, it's going to be really, really tough. The Nets really don't have a guy like that. And yet still, the way they're running their offense, which has a lot of movement, which has getting the hands started, especially when Ben Simmons is in on the court, ball in the hands of Schroder, ball in the hands of Cam Thomas, right? Getting things going, that it's leading to way more points than I thought. They have a very clear vision of what they're trying to do on offense, which is when Schroder has the ball, we're going to run pick and roll, and we're going to get him try to down the lane and just getting lobs up to whoever's in there. And when it's Cam, we're going to run screen, or even simply screen the screener action. And then we're going to try to free him up for shots either at the 3-point line or in the mid range, or if he can get downhill. I mean, it's like, it's not predictable in the sense that you don't know what they're doing on a play to play basis, but it's clear what the hierarchy is, right? And offenses can survive when there's a clear hierarchy and everyone else knows what's happening, and you have two guys that actually are okay with the ball in their hands. Again, I'm taking the L here. I did not think this was possible, really, in the way that they were sort of made up, but they're scheming it. And just watch the actions they run. They run little screen, pin down to get the ball in Cam's hands or something like that, and then he either goes to work or they kick out to open. They try to kick out to open shooters. It's working. And the first quarter was like a perfect example of it.
Well, and not that Doug need not be defended, but it's like when you look back at the last couple of seasons, last season and a half, and you say it's like, well, of course this can't work. Why? Because it hasn't been working. They haven't been able to manufacture this type of success. Now you only get Dennis Schroder into this team midway through last season, and there's still a different type of agenda. Doug has been trolling the entire internet with his addition by subtraction, moving on from Mikal Bridges, unlocked this entire team. But it is that, it kept making us feel like it was going to be hard. Now, there's the Cam Thomas of it all, who clearly is continuing to take that next step forward for his game. I mentioned a veteran like Schroder, like no Ben Simmons in this one, so you lose a ball handler, even in his capacity to impact the game in the current state of what he's doing right now. But the fact that you were able to, even a bad start to the season for Denver right now, even off of a back-to-back, right? All of those things you want to put into the bucket. You're still playing the Joker. You're still playing Murray. You're still playing Gordon. We talked about how, hey, these guys are bigger at most positions. They have more athleticism at certain positions. It's going to be hard to defend. And guess what? It was hard to defend because it was a 144-139 game. So you gave up a lot of points, but the fact that you were able to find success consistently on the offensive end really just speaks to, again, coaching. And I think sometimes we talked a lot about you and I being probably always erring on the side of giving a little more for a sample size. Jacques Vaughn, even Steve Nash, very early days, right? Instead of maybe just saying, hey, there has to be a world where this caliber of NBA players, they're in the NBA. Something has to be better than what we've been seeing. And over the last couple of seasons, it was impossible. I want to get into Cam Johnson, all the key sequences that came out of this one. We'll get into that here in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at Gametime. Look, there's nothing better than going to a live event, whether it's an NBA game, maybe NHL on the ice. You want to go to sometimes you're watching on the screen. Sometimes you just want to show up and be able to root the team on in person. Nothing better than getting started with that than Gametime picks. It's not just games either. Concerts, comedy shows, theater. It's all there for you on Gametime picks. They're going to filter out the fluff, show you only incredible deals and great seats. So you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets right now on Gametime. I mean, prepare yourself for these prices. Right now on Gametime, you can go see a Nets game. Bulls at Nets this Friday, starting at $32, but that's not even the great one. This Sunday, Pistons at Nets. The deal's available from $9 over at Barclays, over on Gametime. Come on, go find yourself a better deal than that. And by the way, you're not going to show up and be surprised. You're going to be able to see exactly what you're going to see from your seat before you sit down when you buy the tickets. You download the Gametime app, you create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, coming up short, 144-139, overtime loss to the Denver Nuggets. You do have Nicholas Claxton, who fouls out in the overtime session. That's not a knock on him. Frankly, it's a good sign that he was able to navigate through a game like this after his early flagrant foul and, getting out of the contest. You don't have Ben Simmons in this because of injury management. You don't have Day'Ron Sharpe because he's dealing with his own injury at the start of the season. So Nets lacked big bodies. They did a good job switching between Claxton, putting Dorian Finney-Smith at times in the small ball 5 lineup, obviously, as well. But the start of this, to me, is just Dennis Schroder. And I have a high-level philosophical question to ask about him as we work through the season. But when you look at a guy who combined again with Thomas to go for over 50 in this one, had 14 assists in this game, and also goes to shoot 5 from 11 from beyond the arc, like, he's just playing. This might be like peak Dennis Schroder, giving you everything that you need in the perfect spot on a perfect roster where he's the exact veteran leader that you need to have out there.
Yeah, he's a really interesting guy to have on a team like this because he's an ultra competitor. We know that, right? Like he's a longtime veteran. He's got a lot of fire to him, right? He's just is competitive. He's a competitive guy. And when you have super competitive veterans on your team, it is hard. And I underrated this too, probably. It is hard to be so bad, right? Because you're not looking at these situations like the Pistons last year. That's kind of like Cade and roll the balls out, right? Or like the Memphis Grizzlies last year, which is, you're legit wondering who's even playing on a night-to-night basis, right? This is not the situation the current Nets are in. The current Nets are not in a situation where it's just a bunch of young players and you're just trying to figure out a night-to-night basis. These guys do have a clue. And when you have a guy like Schroder who has an idea of what he's doing, can organize an offense, can stay calm, can kind of pick his spots, can make good decisions, really doesn't make bad decisions at all. And I mean, he does every once in a while, but he also has the ball in his hands a ton.
He only had 3 turnovers in this game. That's impressive for the volume and what he was playing at, right? I mean, anything
point
under
guard, three turnovers in 42 minutes. Yeah, that's really, really good, right? And so if you're just going to operate like that, the Nets ended up turning the ball over, 8 total times in 42 minutes. Now the Nuggets only turned the ball over 5 times, but that's just not. That you're not giving the other team free chances. And if you have a point guard like Schroder, who is, again, calm under pressure, has played basically in every type of game short of the championships or probably the conference finals or anything like that, but has been in just about every other situation, you are just going to have nights where you're able to kind of stick in games. And his ability to run with the bigs like Claxton, like Clowney, right? Guys like this, and be able to find them rolling to the basket, which he's really good at, and he can finish at the rim. This just gives him a high enough floor. So it's definitely something, again, the theme of this episode is kind of looking back and taking stock, for me at least, of where I thought this team was going to be. The considerably better version of this team is happening because of guys like him. Yeah. And they're just inability. Again, you can't be horrible if he plays 30 plus minutes. You're not going to be great. You're not going to be great. You're not going to go into the championship. If Dennis Schroeder is your point guard for 35 minutes a game, I probably also know where the ceiling for that team is. Sure. I mean, short of having other crazy superstars on it. But I also probably underrated what the floor was. And I think that's something we're seeing early on.
And that's the difference between, we talk about other veterans. We'll talk about Cam Johnson here, who had a great game, but Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, when you talk about other veterans on this team, well, they're not point guards. And that's just the difference, right? Because we haven't seen that type of sample size relative to what Schroeder's been providing over the start of this season. So ball in hand, orchestrating offense, yes. Even if, as we'll get into Cam Johnson here, who gave you across 40 minutes, 7 of 14 from the field, 6 of 10 from deep, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, which was pretty impressive for him in this one as well, and 20 points. Okay, that's great. And I'm not even knocking it. We're going to praise him for that performance. But that doesn't get you across the line on making the team better overall. You can knock down those shots. He does facilitate a bit in this one because, as you mentioned at the top, ball movement has been put at a premium under Jordy Fernandez. But you need to have the go-between there of Dennis Schroeder, who's making sure the ball keeps moving, who is pushing the pace a little bit here. And I don't want to, you can cut it off if you feel, sidebar into the fact that no Ben Simmons in this game. It's not to dump on a guy that wasn't playing, but I can't see a Brooklyn Nets roster scoring 139 points with Ben Simmons on the floor because of the way that it breaks down. We saw some of the offensive possessions in the game prior. The fact that he has that lack of finishing decision-making right now is what Schroeder was doing every single time with the ball in his hands, right? Lobs up to Claxton around the basket, kicking out to the corner. We know that that's something that is a part of Ben Simmons' game in the facilitation, but we also see the breakdowns of those plays. And I just think that the game against Denver was such a free-flowing offensive effort for the Nets that it's something you don't want to diminish by having guys that don't quite fit into that. And we'll talk a little bit about Dorian Finney-Smith, who unfortunately was a bit of a kink in that machine because he just wasn't knocking down the open looks like Johnson was.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do here on Wednesday night with Simmons coming back against Memphis. My guess is because Claxton didn't start against Denver, they'll continue doing that, right? Clowney ends up getting the start. Claxton comes in off the bench. Again, they kick the can down the road again on decisions like this because Claxton didn't start in this game. You don't have to move him back to the bench. They can just continue on the ramping up minutes train or wherever they are. He played 26 minutes in this game. It's the back-to-back. Maybe he sits. Like, I don't really know. And they kicked the decision down the road. Again, I'm with you on the fluidity of the offense working a lot better when you have just a rim running big with Schroder, and like then can just make up defensively for some of that stuff too. And like everyone else is spacing the floor, because if you can run high pick and roll with the screener, and they're doing a lot of like 1-2 screening actions with Cam Thomas too. Like they're like that. Cam is coming in as an initial screener. It's actually what happened on the last play of the game. I know people were like, "Oh, you mentioned DFS. DFS has to take the last shot of the game. He takes a corner three. Like that's what Jordi Fernandez drew up." That's not really what he drew up. If you look at the play, in my opinion, there was like an optionality piece where it was Schroder gets the ball. They see if they're going to get the switch, because Cam's the original screener. They see if they're going to get the switch. They get it. He gets immediately downhill, and Jokic comes over, digs on help on the baseline, and the second Jokic moves toward protecting the basket, he kicks out to the open shooter. Like that was the play design. And I think it was going to be wherever the help came. I think they spread the court. They had Cam Johnson at that point, weak side corner three too. Like I know, because you see the last shot and you're like, oh my God, DFS gets the last shot drawn up for him. No, I don't think that's the way it was. I think there was put the ball in Schroeder's hands. And this is a testament to Schroder. It's like ball in his hands. There's 4 decisions to make here. And you got 6 seconds. You have 6 seconds to make 4 decisions, which is 1, give the ball to Cam if that's the better option. Okay, that doesn't go. 2, I guess it's 3. 4. 2, see if you get to the basket, depending on which side you drive. If you drive right and Jokic helps, you kick to that shooter. If you drive the other way and the help comes from the other side, which I think was Gordon, you kick out to Cam Johnson. I think that was the play. And it's a testament to trusting Schroder to be able to make those like lightning fast decisions within 6 seconds. Or 4 seconds or whatever it was, that really, so like long story short, like just breaking down that last play, I think goes back and looks at like how much trust they have him in the system right now.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like Cam Thomas off the screen is up above the break, just to the left side a little bit there, waiting for it. But there's coverage coming out to him, to your point. And that's, listen, it's a strong play design. And it does speak to, too, we saw last season, and this isn't a knock on Cam Thomas, where ball in his hands, and I'm going to try to navigate to open space and get a shot up. And we've seen him knock down crazy ones. But you'd rather have it in the pure point guard, let him orchestrate it. And really, the phase 1 of that, getting into the paint and having the defense make its adjustments, is exactly what you want. And then he reads off of it. And listen, if Dorian Finney-Smith knocks it down, everything looks fantastic on the back end of this. It's probably unfortunate that it comes in a game where Dorian Finney-Smith was 1 of 7 from beyond the arc, right? So you don't have high hopes when the ball is in his hands in the corner, but it still was a strong play design, strong opportunity. It doesn't go down. Coming up here in a second, though, what about Ziaire Williams? It's just so funny how this guy just keeps giving you more and more impressive sample sizes, including 4 of 5 from beyond the arc. We'll dive in on some of the young performers coming out of this game here to close things out in just one moment. So the Brooklyn Nets fall in overtime at home. They are on the front end now, going into the back-to-back here against Memphis. So we'll see what the adjustments are from Jordi Fernandez. You mentioned there, Doug. Claxton ramping up. He plays 25 minutes. Ben Simmons will come back into the lineup. So there'll be some shuffling of pieces here. The other part that comes out of this, though, is I want to get to Ziaire Williams, obviously, because he had an incredible performance. But when we talked about, the assists, mentioning just Schroder at 14, 5 for Cam Johnson, we said there too. Dorian Finney-Smith for the bad shooting performance. I mean, he was 5 of 11 from the field. He was 1 of 7 from beyond the arc. So getting towards the basket and being kind of an off-ball slasher, that has worked for him. 6 of 11, got to the line a lot, a couple of N1s in this game. So still gave you 17 points. I like the fact that when you look into the bench and we talk about Ziaire Williams, that you also have 4 players with 2+ assists. Ziaire had 4 in this game as well. So like the system is also working here because it carries over from starters to bench unit. 3 players in double digits, again, led by Ziaire Williams, 4 of 5 from deep, 7 of 8 in 22 minutes of action. We said the 3-point shot needs to come to fruition for him to have value. It's fruition. It has been harvested, and he is now showing you all the other value that you get to watch off ball, defensively, athleticism, some great decision making from him on the offensive end too, setting up teammates in this game. This has been a continuation, but the best performance for him through 4 games this season.
I'm at real risk of like talking about this guy too much. It's really the fact
we never do that on this podcast, though. We never go too far on talking about some players.
I mean, even on Twitter too. I can't. I'm just like kind of amazed. He's really just so good. And the fact that they got Ziaire Williams and a 2nd round pick for Diakite, like it's already a heist. It's already a heist. The fact that they just got the Ziaire plus the second, like you got another guy and you gave up a guy that was never going to touch your team at all. And they gave up like rights to somebody too that was never going to play. Like this is just such an absolute heist. And again, for the umpteenth time in a row, we said the one thing that Williams had to do was be able to shoot threes. And if he can shoot threes, even moderately, everything else is already there for him. Athleticism, bounce, defensive, just versatility. He's 8 for 12 to start the season. He's not going to continue as a 67% three-point shooter. But showing that he even has an 8 for 12 stretch in him, like it means something. You know what I mean? Like, because if you're a terrible shooter in the current NBA, most terrible shooters do not have 8 for 12 stretches even in their thing. It's a small sample size, but it probably at least points to not bottom of the barrel, right? Yeah. like that's really what we're looking at here. So for a guy who's a 31% career 3-point shooter, to start the year 8 for 12, and the shot, and I'll tell you right now, I'm no shot doctor, but the shot looks smooth. Like the way he's shooting, the shot looks smooth. The way he's shooting, it doesn't just look like, MKG, throwing the ball behind his head and it happens to go in. Michael K. Gilchrist, like throwing the ball behind his head and goes in. These are above the break threes, the rhythm threes. And so I just don't think, clearly 67% is not sustainable, but it's also tough, famous last words, it's also tough to see him going back down to 29% or something like that. Right. Just the way he's shooting with the confidence. So absolute heist already, willing to call it now. Question becomes probably as we play out the season is like they didn't extend him. He's headed for RFA territory, but they'll be able to re-sign him. This is an absolute steal for Marks and Company.
Yeah, no concerns. They're going to have a ton of money next offseason. You can go ahead and bring him back on whatever contract you so choose. And to your point, that's probably the only other thing you want to see here is, hey, you typically can't run this hot and then bottom out in some regard. You hope that the truth is somewhere in the middle. As long as we see that, even when he does cool off from beyond the arc, as long as it cools off to the tune of 35% for a handful of games and then starts to push closer to 40 overall, then we're in great territory. The other part about this, I will say, not to put in a little bit of negativity or cold water on a game like this. We said it before. The one thing that, we always have the eye on is the deadline and clearing some veterans out. Okay, the beauty of it is you can just go ahead and move Dorian Finney-Smith out, and Ziaire Williams can just pick up those minutes. We've seen Jalen Wilson play well at the start of the season. So you have plenty of options here. And we've already seen, by the way, conversation maybe for an off day. The fact that we originally think about, well, you'll take out Cam Johnson, you'll put Jalen Wilson right into that automatic spot. Well, not if you have Noah Clowney and Nicholas Claxton and Ziaire Williams. Now, all of a sudden, you start to shuffle a little bit, and you can make this roster a little bit bigger across all these positions. But the fact that this coincides, Ziaire Williams shooting so well from the perimeter with Dorian Finney-Smith not shooting at all from the perimeter, has had the 1 3 for 6 performance against Orlando. He's under 26% on the season right now. It just also feels like the natural movement of, ships in the night, one player going out, one player coming in, is leading towards Ziaire Williams just getting an expanded role here. And I'm curious about what happens over the next, say, 2 to 3 weeks, where eventually Jordy probably just is going to need to be rewarding guys that are playing well. And I think we can see a changing of the guard even before we get some of those trades. I know we want high trade value. I know how much that matters. Dorian Finney-Smith to me right now is the guy that maybe is just, it doesn't really matter. The value is going to be low. It already got diminished from where you once had him, and you don't want to take away from a young player that's been stepping up a lot.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to see it at this point. He's 31. It's not exactly getting better on the shooting tip. Like the ship may have just sailed on the value with the money too. I mean, a year ago the money looked okay, and it's just like not in the current NBA. Yeah. This number just doesn't look as good, right? And so, especially when these guys are like, and they're not comps, but some guys are signing minimum deals. Some guys like Lonnie Walker can't even find a spot, right? Are you really wanting to get out and pay Dorian Finney-Smith at 25, 30% 3-point shooter, $15 million on a player option, which he's almost assuredly going to pick up next season? I'm just not sure that's in the cards. So yeah, again, this ship might have sailed here.
And just a big part on that too, the contrast that we see in athleticism between Ziaire Williams and a player like Dorian Finney-Smith, right? Like that matters too. Defensively, it matters. Williams is just more athletic. He can rotate quicker. He can cover different positions better. So those things all start to give you a little bit of a contrast as well when you look at sample sizes, young versus old here. Other than that, man, we look ahead to the Memphis game. Do you, because we can go ahead and give the brief preview, cover the betting line and the spread and which way the hosts are going to go on this one. Do we have concerns that the hype and coming so close here? Because the other high level takeaway is the Nets are 1-3, right? It's been so much fun to watch. There's great performances. This team it's going to be amazing to watch this team all year. And they are still 1-3. And now when you go into the back-to-back and you want that win, you feel like you came so close and maybe deserved it. Do you think we're going to have some of these games going forward? Because I do, where maybe the roster just has that little bit of a letdown, especially when you look at ramping up Claxton, Ben Simmons coming back, the minutes. Like, there's going to be some clunkiness, I think, here against this Memphis team.
Yeah, it's hard to know. Like, we're going to see who's ultimately on the injury report. They haven't ruled anybody in or out yet as of this recording. And also Jase at last game. And so for the Grizzlies, I'm not sure he's going to be back. It's a little tough to know exactly where this is going to land. I will say, though, if you look at, I guess we can give our, did you give your prediction? Sorry, did I miss that? Or did you give a prediction?
No. We got to build to it.
Okay, sorry. One more thing. It's funny because the Nets are 1-3, but they're 6th overall in the East in point differential so far, which is like, again, going back to the top of the show, when we talk about expectations and results and all this stuff, it's like 1-3, great, we'll take the record. But, and I'm not, and I'm really, and honestly, I'm not interested in watching like an 18-54 season or 64, 18-64 season. Like that doesn't sound fun, right? But also, if you want to just maintain, the ability to stay there down near the bottom, but also just not having, just getting pummeled every single night. Like, this is where you want to be. Minus 2.7 point differential over the season. Only the Cavs, Celtics, Magic, Heat, and Knicks have a better one through 3 or 4 games. So it's just a funny spot the Nets find themselves in, a testament to what we said about sort of like where everything stands with where we are as a fan base rooting for this, which is play hard every single night, stay in games. If we can sit on the edge of our seat and take a buzzer beater 3 and they make it, I think we all would have been happy.
Right.
They lose. No one's that disappointed, right? The pendulum doesn't swing all the way back, right? And that's where it's just the pendulum swing aspect that we're not dealing with this season, which is kind of a cool spot to be.
Oh my
goodness.
And
maybe that's some copium. I'm sure like another fan base would come in here and say, "Oh, nice copium." Like, of course your losses. Okay, whatever. I don't care. Like, that is what it is. It's the reality of the situation. You get a better draft pick in a generational draft class if you lose games. I didn't make the rules. I wish they were different. This is the way they are.
100%. Plus 12.5 Brooklyn at home against Memphis. Who you got?
Brooklyn.
Yeah. This will be the first time all season that we will be agreeing on our picks here. How could you possibly, if the odds and the spreads are not going to account for how good this team has looked and the fact that they just lost an overtime thriller to the Denver Nuggets, they got youth, they got legs, they'll come in here back at Barclays plus 12.5. Give me the Brooklyn Nets. So we'll see how we shake out on that end as well. And it does make for exciting basketball. I'll be very curious here to see Ben Simmons come back on the floor for the Brooklyn Nets as well. And obviously we'll be back in on Thursday, breaking down the action from that game too.
Right now, Nets against the spread. The record against the spread this season, 3-1, tied for 5th in the NBA against the spread. That is one of those ones where it's like that's the ultimate.
Do they reward anything at the end of the year for team best against the spread? Do they count that?
Yeah, money if you bet on them.
Ooh, nice.
But money if you bet all season on them, and that's your record, then you are rewarded by having more money in your bank account. Okay, we're gonna get out of here. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Nets wherever you listen, and then also make sure you subscribe to Locked On Nets over at YouTube. Go over to WeGotNets.com, grab 4 stories in 4 days about the Nets season. WeGotNets.com.
When I was younger, I could remember anything, whether it happened or not, and that is Mark Twain.
One of the all-time great poets. We're back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball, yeah.